I lost my father for long periods of time. He would be in China 3 to 5 months a year, and I didn't understand what China meant. It was a very different place with different people, with different ideas, but it was like getting a story at bedtime at night.
You didn't know your father was on an ice-breaking mission?
No, I had no idea at all. Later in life, all of us, the 5 children, began to understand the difficulty that he had of making the decision to give up everything in his life and transfer it all to helping trade with China. I think he was open to doing something with his life that had more contribution to humanity. He took a big risk, but it worked out okay. Of course, as you know, my father was shocked beyond all imagination at the deprivation and the horrors of what he saw in China in 1953. He was just reduced to tears. He never cried. I never saw him cry. But he saw such terrible things that had happened to the Chinese people.
When your father was in China back in the 1950s, China was really poor.
Yes.
And what gave him the confidence to sell products to a country that was experiencing poverty?
I don't think he was there to sell products to China. That was one aspect of it. He was there to buy from China as well. It was always considered to be a two-way trade. This was about cementing peace, cementing friendship.
What commodities did your father buy from China and vice versa back
Well,
then?
feathers was a big one. Feathers and downs. I grew up selling them to Europe and to the United States. Casings, which is the casing is the outside of the stomach of the pig, and it's used to wrap the sausage in. There are lots of oils, tongue oil. There's a lot of different things, but we started the trade in porcelain. Restarted the trade in porcelain. There was a lot of trade in porcelain from the 17th century, and glass and basketware and floor coverings, all sorts of things.
So you went to China back in the 1970s yourself,
Yes.
the first time, having learned so much about China. What was your experience like?
It was, I wouldn't say it was like my father's, because he walked into terrible poverty. For me, it was absolutely amazing. I'd never come across anything like it. The visual impact of fields everywhere, right up to the edge of the railway track. Every piece of land was used for producing food and other things. I think the thing that I was left with was the people of China. That what was translating China towards being a country of modernity was the people. They were determined to work all hours of the day. Whatever they did, they were doing it with great commitment. And the people of China was what I came away with as my strongest feeling. China is able to pull a group of people together to work out how to build trade from China to Europe through the land routes. That was being done for 40 years before they even got to the point of announcing it under Xi Jinping. So China has this long-term approach to planning. It has long-term, medium-term and short-term. And it's able to do all these things in a very sophisticated way.
So what you saw was a different governance system right there, and it changed your perception of China.
Yes.
And were you expecting something like the reform and opening up would come up?
At that stage, I was trying to find a way to do long-term business with China, which at that stage was actually impossible, but that didn't stop me thinking about it. And I read very carefully everything from the 1978 Third Plenum, and I got no idea what was going to happen. They were going to move 800 million people off the land into factories and becoming people who were in manufacturing and service industries. We had no idea that that's what was there. It took me 20, 30 years to begin to understand it. If you take, for example, in about 15 years ago, everybody wondered why China was building so many roads and highways, but yet had no car manufacturing company. They innovated by creating joint ventures between the foreign car company and the Chinese car companies. They brought together some of the great scientists in China to work out how to make the next generation of car, which, as you know now, is the electric car. Nobody else was thinking of that. China worked out how to make the electric car and operated inside China, and China started exporting their cars because it's very important to the new energies.
But now the EU has slammed additional tariffs on the Chinese-made electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because China is supporting its electric vehicle business too much with the subsidies?
What China is doing is they're making electric cars for the benefit of the people of China, and they're priced at the price that they ought to be to get the attention of the market. That's standard marketing, whether it's America or Europe or China. So what the Chinese are doing is offering that. So when the Europeans put on the tariff, what do the Chinese say? Hold on a second, we've given your car companies a fortune in access to the Chinese market. We didn't put tariffs on them. You put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on you. And all the car companies in Europe said, don't put the tariffs on. But these rather silly people in the EU bureaucracy, following American advice, want to try and make life difficult for China. And it's involved in a battle with China, which I don't think it will win.
So you think that the US has a huge influence on EU's China policy?
The Americans have put the tariffs on, but they're not going to have any much imports of electric cars. They're going to carry on with the petrol cars because that's what they've been developing the market for years. So there's a lack of reality at the moment about Europe's attitude. The problem for Europe is it wants to act tough like the Americans, and it can't, because it doesn't have the power, the scale, and the imagination. And that's why Mercedes and people like this have said, no, don't put the tariffs on, because they know that their world markets will be impacted as a result.
The ice-breaking trip your father made 70 years ago, let's look back at history, broke the trade embargo that some Western countries imposed in China, and now China's trade tensions, relations with some countries, including the US and the EU, you were talking about, have soured again. So do you think it will get better or worse, and what is different now?
My reading of it is that China saw this a long time ago. In the beginning of the 21st century, I could see China, it was called going global. What did going global mean? It meant moving the production out of China to different parts of the world. Globalization is under threat. Protectionism is happening everywhere. But where's it happening? It's happening in Europe and North America. Why? Because they don't have global economies. They have national economies, and their companies make things in their countries, and they want to continue to make them in their countries because they want to employ their people.
Now, how about the UK government? Do you think the Labour government could be different when it comes to its China policy compared with the previous government?
The Conservatives developed a new trade policy to become important in Asia. Well, I've been saying for a long time, China's focused on Asia. But if you look at it, if we want to be significant in Asia, we're going to have a proper relationship with China. There's a lot of opportunity for the British government, for the Labour government, to reposition itself with the Chinese. It'll have to be very careful about how it handles the United States. There are more and more people becoming experienced in the UK about China, but we have to find the roads to recover that relationship. But it can be done.